Welcome to Issues and Answers with your host Diane Kinderwater. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. And now, Issues and Answers with your host Diane Kinderwater.
You tell me, will the phones here at KCHF TV studios be ringing off the line because of my guest, who is very provocative? He's bringing up issues that you may have thought about, but maybe never mentioned, but he is very proud to help us here on the show become more provocative in our thought, be more creative, more critical in our thinking, and it's maybe a lesson that we could learn, because many of us perhaps aren't doing it. We're just accepting, actually just trying to get by, trying to survive, but there's more to life than just survival. There's an image that we need to continue, and there is a concern that our country is done for. Do you ever feel that way? Well, I'm not sure if you do, but you may have. But we're going to talk to Jeffery Candelaria, a local business owner and a radio host here in Albuquerque. He is going to be provocative. He considers himself a thought leader who is provocative. He's written recent editorials or op-ed pieces that have been in the Albuquerque Journal. And when he comes back, we're going to talk about we the people. Is that an illusion? You tell me right after this. My guest is showing me his nature. I'm saying on TV you gotta smile, and he is smiling. Jeffery Candelaria, thank you for being back on our program and for smiling. That's your nature.
I'm a person. I own my nature, and I don't apologize for that. Socrates was a cynic, and he's the one that taught us, 2,300 years ago? Ask questions. Don't just accept, what particularly these policymakers tell us. Question things, engage in a curious mind and critical thinking. Question things, make up your own mind, even if it means having to accept the slings and arrows of even people watching me today. Not everybody likes what I say, but I'm going to continue to be convicted to hopefully inspire people to question things, to be engaged in critical thinking, and not just accept and adhere to all these dumb platitudes that our policymakers make on both sides.
And I think we can find right now, Jeffery Candelaria, that actually accepting it has put us where we are today, and it's not a good position.
Absolutely.
That people are not standing up and shouting and screaming. What was that movie? I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Network, 1976.
And we're not saying it anymore. We're, as I said, kind of at the beginning of the
program,
program,
these face diapers,
kind of trying to just survive. We're just trying to survive, but is that life?
I defy wearing these, I admit it, because there's no science that says this stuff works. Think about all that infrastructure that companies spent, billions of dollars, those little plexiglass things. There's no science that says that does anything. And all these companies spend billions of dollars putting up this plexiglass. It's just so dumb. That's what I mean when I say question the science. Do your own research, and then ultimately make up your own mind. Half of my family doesn't agree with my conservative, liberal way of thinking, but I'm not going to acquiesce because my dad disagrees with me. I love him, but we disagree ideologically on almost everything, but I still love him.
You're a local radio host, also a business owner, and today, in addition to discussing some of these op-ed pieces that have run in the newspapers, industrial psychology is a topic you wanted to talk about. Tell me, what do you mean by industrial
psychology, we touched on it at another time. Particularly if you own a company, you own a business, you're a leader, one should understand the psychology of your leadership, the psychology of the way you're running that business, and how you're executing what you say you're executing. That's beginning to understand a little bit of the psychology of the business. It's how your clients, how your staff, and how people feel about you. Not what they think about you, how they feel about you. So thinking generally happens in the frontal cortex area of our brain. Feeling and emotion is an extraordinarily powerful influencer and motivator. That's the limbic part of our brain. How many of you that own a business or are leaders think about how you're leading from the limbic part and the frontal cortex part? And are those two congruent? That's a small example of understanding the psychology of leadership or the psychology of your business, how your clients think of you, how they feel about you. Like half the people listening to me today or watching me, they may not like me, but they might think about some of these ideas that I'm putting forth.
So is there one thing more important, Jeffrey, than another? Is thinking about a business more important than how they feel about a business?
It depends. So if somebody's providing a thoracic surgery on your heart, do you want to feel do you want to feel good about the doctor, or do you want to think he's the best
good
doctor available?
Good point. Good point.
That's
the difference.
And ultimately that's what people want. I just don't know that whether they think about that enough, literally think about it, or demand it enough. Yeah. It's like all this wokeness. Oh, we need 28 transgender pilots. We need 18 African American pilots. We need 65 Hispanic pilots.
I want a competent pilot
I
to
want
fly
the
my
best
plane.
pilot. Yeah. That's what meritocracy is, as opposed to equity. Equity is providing outcomes based on, predetermined agendas. I want the best doctor for my kid. I want the best pilot. I want the best lifeguard at the ocean. If I'm swimming on at a shoreline or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's what meritocracy is about. And most people want that, but maybe they've never really considered it along those lines.
We didn't actually go through the definition between equity and equality. What's the difference there, Jeffrey?
Equality, from my perspective, is you give all kids in third grade the same opportunity to make an A on their math test. Equity says, no, you gotta have so many transgenders that have an A, you gotta have so many Hispanics to get an A, you gotta have 4 blacks to get an A. That's equity. That's already determining an outcome and stripping away and removing the individual achievement toward that grade. And that's a very dangerous way to conduct a society.
We've seen that, I think, in recent decades in the university system, the college systems. Isn't that true? That they needed perhaps to be in their master's program and their doctoral program or to become a surgeon. Here, even in the state of New Mexico, they needed so many different category boxes checked.
Well, there's a distinction, once again, that's why critical thinking. I'm not against diversity and inclusion. All I'm saying is give everybody that's included in part of that eclectic composition of students, give them an equal opportunity to achieve. But don't determine their outcomes based on, how victimized they were, or how Hispanic they are, or how transgender they are. So I'm about diversity and inclusion, but based on giving people equal opportunity from there, not making predetermined outcomes. That's what equity is, and that's dangerous.
You talked about the victimization of Americans, about New Mexicans. What do you mean by that? And is that something new?
No.
Is it something that's been around for a while?
I don't think the human condition has changed at all. It's just a different incarnation of what's going on based on circumstance and technology. Truman once said, President Truman, the only thing that's new in the world is the history you haven't studied. So it's all kind of happened before. You enjoyed that aphorism, I could tell. Did you like that? Mm-hmm. But anyway, getting back to this victimization thing, I think it started, I'll use a more contemporary example. I think FDR in the 30s and 40s, to combat a severe depression, started bringing some of this, the government's going to solve all your problem kind of thing. I think it really accelerated during the Great Society with Lyndon Johnson. I think you had the disillusionment of our society with the Vietnam War, the assassination of Kennedy. These are complex issues, but I think people felt victimized and maybe non-trusting of government, which I absolutely think continues. And it expresses itself when certain policymakers say, well, you know what, you're African American, the world owes you something. Or you're Hispanic, the world owes you something. Or you're gay and the world owes you something. Well, clearly I don't believe in any of that. But when someone repeatedly tells you that you're a victim and you've been oppressed, and many people have, but then they start building policies around that compensate to that, then people naturally, perhaps unnaturally, begin to gravitate toward believing that their whole life is beyond their control, that government is the master,
answer.
that government is the answer. And that's antithetical to the way I think.
Antithetical to how our country was developed.
Correct.
The Constitution, and that's what I
Right.
wanted to get into. We the people, we all know that first statement of the Constitution, and as I said, going to Washington D.C., you see it at the monument, I think it's the Lincoln Memorial, you see it, we the people. But you don't see it that way anymore.
No, I think we the people is an illusion. Again, all these policymakers, Republicans, Democrats, whatever, we want to unite our country, we the people. I think our country is so divided now, that chasm is so extreme that what's our population, 330 million people? I don't know what the exact number is, but let's say half of that possibly believe that they're a victim, that government should provide their cradle-to-grave livelihoods, and that they're not in control of their own destinies. The other half of the population, people like me, and I think perhaps you, and even this station, believes that people should be accountable, self-reliant, and engage in a work ethic, and that life is intrinsically not fair. But you don't position yourself as a victim. You see things as obstacles, and through the grace of God and hard work, you overcome them. So that distinction between even the way you look at the world means that there is no such thing, in my view, that we all believe in common principles anymore. I think the division is just too great, and no one talks about that as an obvious, self-evident truth.
When do you think that began?
Well, I think you've always had people that felt they were victims, but I think it really manifested with, like I said, when you started having big government at the federal and then now the state and local level begin to embrace victim-oriented policies, and some with good intention. When the government says you should be making $18 an hour because I say so. Well, that's an example of shoving down a regulation into your business, but the unintended consequences is that that company is probably going to raise prices. And by the way, it's also insulting to you because that means you don't have the ability to achieve your own destiny in achieving $18 in that company yourself. So it's actually subtly and covertly insulting.
And not allowing you to provide for your own family, that you need the government to provide for your own
government
family.
does that, but they're doing
But
that
it's
based on
it's insulting.
But they're also doing it based on their allocation. You're going to get $1,200 a month because that's what we said we're going to do for you. So that person now feels, wow, I'm living on $1,200 a month. Are they masters of their own destiny? No, because if they don't do what government says, they're going to forfeit that $1,200. But if they were masters of their own destiny, they're not going to get the $1,200. They might make more, but guess what they have to do? They have to get off their butts and make it happen. That's why the liberal wing of our policy-making machine has done a good job of attaching emotion to their policies as well.
The emotion of
We
feeling
care
the
more. We care more. Those evil conservatives, they don't like you. They're just about profiteering. Well, guess what profiteering did? It creates innovation. It engenders ingenuity. It gives people the opportunity to live in Tanawan and not some trailer in wherever, New Mexico. Don't get mad. I didn't make the rules. That's economics.
You know, it's interesting when politicians spoke about providing a free college education for every American. I can imagine, oh, they are the better party. They're giving you a free college education.
And so what does that do when you extrapolate that? When everybody gets a free college opportunity, now everybody has a degree, what does that do to the degree itself? It compromises it. It engenders, it creates mediocrity. And your listeners don't know me, or your viewers. I came from South Broadway, so I'm not some guy with a silver spoon in my hand. I've seen both sides of what it's like. I've seen lower, little middle class, blighted neighborhood living, because that's where I grew up, South Broadway. No offense to South Broadway, but it's a blighted area. So that's where I grew up. So I'm not sitting here saying I'm this great, look at me with my cross pin and whatever. Whatever I've achieved through the grace of God, I've achieved. and it's been hard, and I don't apologize for that. But I'm not sitting there as a victim making $1,200 a month.
In your op-ed piece, you ended by saying, the founders of our country, the founders who wrote the U.S. Constitution, miscalculated. Quote, we the people and one nation under God, indivisible, you stated is unfortunately unsustainable.
Yeah, I think Madison, Jefferson, Hamilton, John Adams, Franklin a little less, but the people that constructed the Constitution, the machine that is our governance, I think they assumed that everybody was going to believe in self-reliance, work ethic, family, and their sense of God. And I think that's where they made the miscalculation, because not everybody believes in self-reliance, accountability, whatever your version of God is. And remember, they were more of a homogeneous group. They were all mostly English, mostly white, upper middle class people. So I'm not suggesting there wasn't some white dominance in the construction of our Constitution, because there was. But look at the diversity of our country today. Again, nothing wrong with diversity, but you have such a hodgepodge of different ways of looking at the world that how can you possibly expect an Islamic person, a Jewish person, an atheist, a transgender, a Christian?
But our country was founded on those principles. Our country
on
was
the principles.
On those principles.
But now that you have 330 million people subscribing to different ways of looking at the world, how can there even possibly be common we the people precepts? I don't know. I'm just asking the question. In my view, it's unsustainable.
And what does that mean for our country?
Well, I can't prognosticate, but since you're putting me on the spot, and since I'm not afraid of challenge, I think we're going to have economic upheaval. I think possibly secession, like 1861, 1860, where you had South Carolina secede. I think there may be one or two states that secede from what we call the nation. You're asking me a question. I think that may happen. Is it going to happen tomorrow? I don't know. 10 years? I don't know. The third thing is possibly because of the weak leadership, in my view, of the current president, who I think is incompetent and dangerous, perhaps World War III.
So, oh, great. Oh, thank you, Jeff.
Well, you asked me a
heard
question.
It first here on Issues and Answers. Thank you.
Well, I'm not saying any of these answers or prognostications are pretty. You asked me a question,
yes.
And I'm absolutely possibly wrong, but you asked me a question.
But something to
economic upheaval, secession, or maybe a devastating war, a cataclysm of sorts.
Well, you mentioned the Roman Empire somewhere in one of your op-ed pieces as well. The fall of that.
Yeah, it was based on a republic, and then it ultimately, it basically imploded from within. It wasn't really taken over. Yes, ultimately the Etruscans and the barbarians took it over in 476, 500 AD, but it was already a weakened state because people started imploding from within. The republic died internally, outwardly, and most great empires last about 200-300 years. Persian Empire, Greek Empire didn't last very long. Babylonian empires, they have a birth, an apex, and a demise. And
so
I happen to think
250, we're about 250 or so. So it's about that time. Okay. Also, you got an op-ed piece on the illusion of free speech in this country. We believe, until recently with these big giant tech companies, that we have free speech.
No, we don't.
But we found out kind of we don't.
Your listeners are smart enough to know, if you're a listener out there and you're in a public setting and you own a company or you live in a nice home and you've got 3 kids, are you going to really say what you think about Biden or Black Lives Matter in a public forum? No, because you have too much to lose. So my thesis is the more equity people have in the system, like their reputations, like a 30-year career, those people are less likely to oppose and confront real-life issues. Just like my first segment here, I said some controversial things, not because I'm trying to be a provocative boob, but I really believe in that. And I'm willing to take the criticism. And I may have a lot to lose, but most people don't. I'm not saying I'm more courageous than others. It's just my nature. But if you're a bank president and you make $500,000 a year, are you really going to say out loud at the coffee machine or the water, whatever that thing's called, you know what, I really oppose Black Lives Matter. I don't believe in this. No, that person's going to say very little. That's what I mean about free speech as an illusion. People don't really speak freely because they have too much to lose, depending on where they're at on the economic spectrum. And they're also afraid.
But it's also, in addition to that, to what they can lose, there is the big tech companies who have a monopoly and control and literally take away a person's ability to have free speech.
The former president, Trump, whether you like the guy or not, they canceled him. Big tech canceled him. Can you imagine the president of the United States, whether you agree with the guy or not, not having a forum to discuss his perspectives? He's canceled on Twitter. There's another example where free speech is an illusion because big tech, depending on your political stripe, will cancel you immediately.
Also, in addition to being concerned how you're taken, not out of context, but just the purity of what you're saying, there's the political correctness forces out there. Boy, there's been an assault on that, saying you kind of can't say anything because it might offend somebody.
Right. Or whatever you say might be cherry-picked and dissected and take it out of a context. And next thing you know, Mary Smith said, African American people are lazy, whatever. As opposed to maybe there's a context to that, and maybe that person was talking about a particular segment of that population inside a set of circumstances. So again, people are very circumspect and judicious about what they say, especially in front of strangers. How many people do you see doing this all the time? Or they look down and they whisper to you because, whoever they is, they want other people to hear what they really think.
And also those cameras everywhere with your cell phones recording everything. That's
we're surveilled everywhere. So
hypersensitivity forces are out there. What do you mean by that?
Well, again, a lot of the forces on the left have caused people to be extraordinarily sensitive because they're victimized. Oh, did you just say that? That's because I'm Hispanic. Oh, did you just say that? That's because that person's gay, whatever. So this hypersensitivity, people don't have thick skins anymore. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to engage in discourse and debate. People don't really have conversation. How many times have we heard, oh, we need to have a conversation about that? But people aren't really willing, particularly the political leadership, to really have discourse and debate and say to you, what, I disagree with you, openly and publicly.
And
that doesn't happen. Conversation doesn't happen.
The cancel culture, have you ever seen that before in your lifetime?
Well, during the time of probably the totalitarian regimes of maybe Lenin, obviously during the time of the 40s and the 30s and 40s under the Nazi regime, during the time of Mao Zedong, it's happened before, but a version of that is happening here, all over the place. The people that have the power are media. Think about most media outlets today, they're mostly liberal. And if they disagree with your conservative views, they will not only cancel you, they might attack and castigate you as well.
I can't even believe, here in Santa Fe, the obelisk they tore down right in our own backyard.
Yeah, well, they tore down, the Oñate statue. Oñate was a complicated guy. I wrote an op-ed about that too. I'm not saying he was just exclusively a hero, but he certainly wasn't just, one thing. He was possibly a hero, a bit of a tyrant.
But it was our history.
But he was courageous. He was a pioneer.
Our history.
Well, he brought horses, sheep, cattle, chickens, some of the wine industry, even Catholicism, Christianity to this part of the world. So next time you make the sign of the cross or eat a steak or have a chicken sandwich, you can thank Oñate. He was a complex
But they tore
feature.
down his statue.
His likeness.
His likeness. And advocacy journalism, we've got just 2 minutes to go, Jeffery Candelaria. Journalism is supposed to be objective.
Yeah.
Do we have that anywhere?
Anywhere. I think we have it in certain corners of the journalistic realm, but turn to any journalistic channel and you'll have a talking head who's not just reporting the news, they're taking a side, they're taking a stance, they're advocating a position. That's where journalism has absolutely died. It used to be this very disciplined, very worthy, career. And today it's, who do I like more, Trump or Biden? And I'm going to basically report to bias and prejudice those stories to favor either one.
And what does all this mean for our future, Jeffery Candelaria?
I don't know what it means to the future, but again, I'll end where I started. All people, in my view, should cultivate a curious mind, read more, and question things, and engage in real critical thinking, not just superficial, stupid talking points. Oh, Trump's a bad guy. I happen to think that Trump was very much character flawed, but I still voted for him because I believed in his policies. That's an example of looking beyond the obvious.
And we have the ability to be critical. And just because we may not hold one of these big, lofty political offices, we still have a right to be critical and to question. We still have that right.
And engaging in critical thinking isn't all negative. Last I checked, iron sharpens iron. That's a metaphor for critical thinking.
Very good. Thank you. We're going to leave it at that. Jeffery Candelaria, appreciate you being on the program. Appreciate what you are doing for our community, to engaging us, to propelling us into perhaps something that isn't so comfortable. Challenge ourselves. Appreciate that. We'll do that more on this program. I'm dedicated to that because of Jeffery Candelaria. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Make it a great week with your family. Bye-bye.
Issues and Answers with your host Diane Kinnewater is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program or to purchase a copy of any Issues and Answers program, visit sunbroadcasting.org or call us at 505-345-1991.